Deirdre, thank you so much for joining on Social Impact Power Chats.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored.
Oh my gosh, the honor is mine, truly, truly, truly. And the reason I am so honored to have you is that you really have been a social impact hero and mentor for so many people who I know benefit from your wisdom. And I'm really delighted to have you here. So, perfect segue. The fact that you have been in this work and have been doing it so well is a testament to just how powerful impact can be. But tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get into social impact and make this the career that it has become for you?
Well, thank you again, Emily, for having me. I love sharing my story because I hope it's inspirational to other people, and especially to people coming out of college. And there's so many choices and options, and we really need amazing people in this space doing this work and continuing to do this work when I'm off knitting in a rocking chair at some point. But I started thinking that I was going to do psychology and I was going to be a therapist and do one on one therapy. And I got my undergrad in psychology and went to get my master's in social work. And when I was doing my internship in my master's degree program, I realized that I felt like I needed to do more. That the issues that were coming up, I was working in a group home group setting, and the issues that were coming up, I was getting really frustrated with some of the policies that some of the gentlemen were talking about, and I realized, like, gosh, I feel like I could do more, and I wasn't feeling the excitement about doing the one on one that I thought I was going to feel, and I just had never thought about the world of policy or macro level social work is what I ended up getting my degree in. And one of the things that I realize is, I think about my career journey and my career trajectory is, a lot of people say, well, I was in the right place at the right time, or I was talking to the right person. And I think, I used to talk about that a lot when I was younger, but I really do think we put ourselves in that right place at the right time. So I was very, I would say, anxious to get a really good internship my second year. And I ended up applying for a bunch of different internships and ended up working with Mayor Richard Reardon at the time, the mayor here in the city of Los Angeles, and doing, ironically, I guess, a homelessness policy, because I'm working on homelessness now, unfortunately, an issue that has certainly not gone away. But I was able to get into a place where I could see policy happening immediately right in front of my eyes. And I was able to really kind of glean so many learnings just by watching, what was happening in these conversations in these meetings. And whether it was with local legislators or it was with private sector folks that were coming into the mayor's office to talk about issues, I really learned so much. And by putting myself in that place where so much was happening, I was able to get an opportunity with someone who was connected to the mayor's office, and was able to go work in a government and community relations department of a company, Kaiser Permanente, which is a nonprofit healthcare plan here in California, but really operates as a big corporation, if you will, and learned so much in my 10 years there. At the same time, over those 10 years, I was very proactive about trying to identify training opportunities and professional development opportunities, and ended up in one of those professional development opportunities, meeting someone who led me to my second job, which was to head up um, global corporate responsibility for Mattel, the toy company. But it was not as much about luck as about really being very purposeful and intentional about putting myself in places where I could meet new people, get new ideas, learn about different situations. Um, I also, what one other kind of big career pivot that I had in my life is after doing what was close to 20 years in the corporate sector, I took a step back to spend some more time with my kids who at the time were growing up, going into middle school. And I think that's just something that we as women in particular are faced with on our career trajectories. I saw something the other day that said that women who take a step back from their career path, right, they lose monumental salary increases and career increases because they've taken this step sort of away. It's a really difficult decision, and it's something that I really struggled with. Taking that step away, I made sure before I took the step away that I was on the board of a couple different nonprofits in town. And it was through those board interactions that I ended up moving into the next career pivot that I had. So while I thought I was taking a step away, I actually quickly got a phone call from the new mayor at the time, who had just come in to office, and his team was looking to set up something called a mayor's fund for Los Angeles based on some of the incredible work that had been done in New York City and in other cities across the country. And when you get a call like that, or any of these other opportunities, when it seems like it's something that seems pretty exciting, I certainly had no idea how to set up a mayor's fund. I had never done it before. And I would say that's another part of this journey is, sort of taking leaps of faith, and really having a confidence in your own skill set to know that you can carry that forward. And that was really an important sort of moment for me, which led me on this incredible second kind of career path that I've had over the past 10 years, which is really working in the public and private sector and connecting those kinds of entities to really drive change and impact at scale. And so I led the Mayor's Fund for on and off for close to 10 years, took a moment to lead a private foundation. And now I'm doing some consulting work, which has also been sort of a leap of faith into believing in yourself and in your experiences and believing that others will want to work with you. And it's been pretty exciting so far.
Amazing. And, one of the things that you've highlighted, which I just love and I think is important to underscore, is this weaving between all sorts of lanes. Like, we don't live in a world anymore where if you want to do something good, you have to have this kind of job, from social work to government to foundation to corporate to, everything in between. You have really shown that good can be done anywhere where leadership believes that good can happen. And when you have drivers like you and, the teams that we all know and love, good can grow anywhere, which is like such an incredible lesson that I hope everybody takes to heart.
Well, and Emily, I would just
Yeah.
add to that because I'm jumping in here on your
Do
interview,
it.
but you have, you've really demonstrated that so much in your career. And I know I've taken inspiration watching you along the way as I've watched so many of my other peers. So much of what we do to drive good is looking at the resources that we have in whatever position that we're in, whatever organization that we're in. You could be working in a nonprofit. So maybe you're not going to be granting money, but you have access to incredible volunteers. You have access to data about the work that you're doing, right? You have access to legislators to be able to inform them of the work that you're doing. So, when I'm working in government or with government entities or bureaucracies, right? It's what kinds of resources do you have access to drive that good and that change? And I think that's what real experts in this space do well, is that they understand the myriad of resources that they have access to, and then they leverage those to be able to drive that kind of good.
I co-sign 100% everything that you just said. So would love that, like, is an incredible macro landscape of everything that you have in your, sphere of influence. I'd love to go super micro. If you could share with us, one example of a program, a policy, a something that you have helped to drive and build and put your fingerprints on, and just kind of peel back the onion for us and share, some tips and tricks that you learned along the way that could help people who are inspired by that work.
Well, of course, I had so many ideas of projects in my head, but I have to talk about what happened during COVID.
Yes.
And we all remember, I think, where we were on March 13th of 2020 when the mayor and the county Department of Health and the county supervisors all basically said, we are closing down this city. And the entire country was going through the same thing, right? And it was this incredibly scary moment, where folks did not know, we literally didn't know, right, anything about this virus. We had no idea what was happening from one day to the next. It's hard to remember that
And I'm getting like
moment.
chills.
Well, it's hard to remember that, right? Because now we have vaccines and we know how it spreads. But, right, like that was back when we were like, I have a picture of myself and my husband, like, right, with our gloves and our masks and, like going to the
Totally.
market and washing your groceries. Like we just didn't know. And think about what that feels like, and I feel very fortunate. I have a roof over my head. think about what that feels like if you have insecure housing, if you don't know where your food is coming from one day to the next, if you don't know how you're going to be able to pay your rent, if you don't get to your hourly wage job. That's the reality for so many Angelenos here. And so immediately when that happened, and we were operating as a nonprofit entity next to government called the Mayor's Fund for Los Angeles, absolutely independent 501c3 with a mission to make government better for all of Los Angeles. And so when everything shut down, people much smarter than I, working around the mayor and the mayor himself, kind of started to brainstorm about what can we do so that these folks who cannot go to their dishwashing job, they cannot go to their bus driving job, right? People literally do not know how they're going to make their wage if they don't have, you know, vacation benefits, et cetera, right? And no one knew what companies were going to be doing, right? There was just so much insecurity. But folks know that they had a rent that was coming due in 2 weeks. So we were quickly called to the table as the mayor's fund to say, look, can we access private money to get money going fast? At that point, we also didn't know what government was going to do, right? In the end of the day, the federal government stepped up with millions of dollars that the city was able to then translate right back out into the community. But in those early days, again, no one knew what was going to happen from 1 hour to the next, let alone one day to the next. But we knew that we were in a crisis moment, and we knew that there were incredibly generous Angelenos in this city, and really incredibly generous people. We got donations from around the world who were willing to step up and say, I have extra resources I'm willing to give. So we activated very, very quickly with a couple different programs. We ended up having a direct cash assistance program for individuals who could prove, and you had to prove that you had lost wages, whether because you had an hourly wage job that was not paying or whatever the case may be. And we had incredibly brave city employees who actually went to offices and nonprofit employees. I have to add that as well. We had incredible nonprofit partners, employees who were willing to work every day and go and make sure that they were reading all of this paperwork, make sure that folks were correct, and then literally giving them a cash card that they could use immediately to be able to buy groceries. If their landlord took a credit card, we had a bank step up to allow for those cash cards to be translated into cash at ATMs for free. So really kind of this incredible momentum that was built. So we did direct cash assistance. We did for individuals who were low income. We also did direct cash assistance for restaurant workers, particularly back of the house restaurant workers, but really all restaurant workers, because again, all restaurants were shut down, right? Most restaurant workers are hourly wage employees, really a huge population that was being very hard hit. And then also we did a similar program with a very generous donor around small business, because when everything shut down, right, small businesses really struggled. And there was a long time before those small businesses could ramp back up. Again, the government stepped in later on, both state and federal, to provide cash grant assistance to small businesses. But in the early days, we stepped in and we did this small cash assistance program where we were providing $5,000 for any small business that was in crisis. And again, partnering with our colleagues in the city who were there, who were staffing, who were incredibly brave and continuing to do their work. But it was an amazing moment. And I think about, we did end up doing direct cash assistance for over 100,000 families in Los Angeles, which was amazing. From going from not ever having done it before. And one of the things, I always think about learnings as I think about what I've done in my career. And one of the things I realize is we acted in that moment. And it's almost like sometimes we get in the way of ourselves, because I think we can all think of moments where it was like, well, did you put the deck together? What version of the deck is it? Wait, we need to redo the version of the deck. Well, the deck is just the strategy. Okay, well, we're on strategy 12, right? And you just kind of get in the way of yourself. And it is, I think, all to try to make whatever project you're doing better. But sometimes when you have to act, and in this moment, we were having to act. There was no time for us to really stop and do 5 different decks of anything. Like we just had to do. Um, I think that there is some value in that. And I think that we delivered on success. And sure, we tweaked things along the way when things weren't working, when something wasn't working right. Did we, whatever issues, of course, we made changes along the way, and we did not do it perfect in the beginning by far, but we did it. And sometimes that's such an important thing to remember when you're not in a moment of crisis, that sometimes you just got to do.
And I know as an Angeleno, like watching your work from the sideline and, trying to help our clients do their part in partnership with you all, it was so heartening to know that our leaders cared enough to just do, even when it wasn't perfect, because it was necessary. And
Yeah,
I really, this conversation has taken me back to 2020, and it really does still feel like that sense of civic pride is still very much kind of right there. One thing you said that I just want to underline because it's so important and so relevant, whatever the scale, whatever the size of your organization, people feel like there is an expertise gap and it stops them from being effective. And as you said, you didn't have training to do the first few jobs that you took. You didn't have experience running a huge program in a massive global pandemic. Like, okay. And guess what? You still were able to do and grow and build. And so I hope if people take nothing else from this conversation, like that's such an important thing that is, critical, not just for social impact, frankly, but for every part of your life.
absolutely. I agree. I mean, I think we get lost in our own heads. I am the perfect example of this, of like, oh, starting this new consulting business 6 months ago. Can I do it? Will anyone hire me? Do I know anything? I have 30 years of experience, but you still get in your head of like, I don't do it perfectly. I'm still learning. And then you kind of just have to step back and say, this is what I know. I know I can add value. I know can add value into whatever I'm working on. And I'm also, I think as you get older, you realize when you don't know something and you tap into folks that have that expertise, and you become less afraid of doing that, which I think is super important. And I certainly feel so blessed to be able to have such an incredible network of people, which I think we all have if
Yeah.
we stop and think about it, right? Like that know things differently, that come at experiences differently than I do. And I think, for me being in Los Angeles, that's been especially important because the diversity of our city is such an important um, element of our success. I think it's what sets us apart as a city, and I think it is what drives our success. And I know that I bring only one very specific perspective into whatever project we're working on. So I would say that, one other thing that I've learned over the years more and more and more is that being able to get diverse opinions, diversity based on race and age and gender and um, international versus domestic, and right, like all of those things really add to a conversation, and it's always a better project when you have different perspectives coming into that. So as
Yeah.
much as you can do that as quickly as you can do it without 13 decks, that's the key to success, I think.
100%. Okay. So I can't believe it. We're already at our last question, which is crazy. I feel like you and I could talk for hours, I know. But the last question we always leave with is crystal ball. This work is ever evolving. Impact is not, stopping anytime soon or ever. And would love to know your crystal ball. Where do you see this work going? What are you doubling down on? And what do you hope people are thinking about?
For me, it's about partnerships. I think that companies in particular, not in particular, but companies, foundations, philanthropic institutions, right, for years and years operated in their own silos. This
Mhm.
was their goal. This is what they were going to work on, right? And I mean, if there's anything that I've learned in my public-private experience and with the clients I have now, it is that you can leverage scale, you can leverage impact when you work together. And maybe that goes back to the idea that different perspectives, right, from different organizations will bring more to the table. and different resources, right? A company is bringing different resources than a philanthropic institution, than government. And together, right, when we think about like the homelessness crisis right now, which I have the privilege of working on, we can't do this alone. And there is no single answer. So we have to work together. So, I think that that will happen more and more over the course of time, that folks will be less inclined to stay in silos and be more inclined to working together in collaborative units. I think that's super critical. The other thing I would say is I do think there is an incredible trend that's happening around direct cash assistance. And when
Mm.
we think about helping individuals, I think that that is something that we have seen can make a dramatic difference in the lives of a family and really change the trajectory of that family. And so I think that in some parts of the country, it's being used more than in others. And I think we were able to really leverage that during COVID. I've seen sort of a decline in some of those programs now, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to sort of reverse that and really look to the direct cash assistance model as an opportunity to let individuals choose what they need most to be able to get them on the path to success.
Amazing. Well, brilliant as always. Thank you so much. Our field and our city are lucky to have you,
Oh,
and really appreciate you chatting with us. So
thanks, Emily.
until we meet again.